I keep noticing this thing that I don't really have a proper name for, so I've just started calling it the Blandification of society. I will be out somewhere totally normal, a shopping center, a chain restaurant, a new apartment complex, and it all feels like it was created by the same exact three people just sitting around in a beige, bland conference room. The logos look the same, the font looks the same, the inside of the buildings look the same. Even the food, when we're talking about the restaurants, feels like it was created in the same big industrial, boring kitchen in the sky. It is hard being a tacky, gaudy human in the whole clean girl minimalism, clear nail polish, all gray interior, no clutter, no decor era. Where has the fun gone? Where has the color gone? Where is all of the personality? Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego?
Where in the world is
Carmen Sandiego?
Why were play places in McDonald's ripped away from us? Why are beautiful older homes being stripped of all character or just demolished entirely and replaced by ugly McMansion wannabes that all look the same? And why is the interior always boring and white? And it's not even just the physical stuff. No. It's the apps, the music, the way brands talk online. Again, I don't really have a great word for it besides blandification, but it's almost like a uncanny valley, but for society. I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but if you get it, you get it. It feels like life and texture has been stripped away from society. And as the tech bros and, capitalism continue to piss all over us, I really don't see this getting any better. I really do see this getting considerably worse, which is saying something because we're in a pretty bad spot when it comes to, originality and color and life in society. If we sit here and let these loser, soulless fucking billionaire weirdos who only care about money and not art and feeling or, just humanity in general, if we let them control what the trends are and shape and design society in what their desired image is, it's going to get full-on padded white walls. Okay, it's going to be asylum chic, and our feelings and our personality will follow suit. And we're already starting to see that. Before I go any further, just in case it hasn't been made abundantly clear by what I've been saying, I'm not a fan of capitalism, and spoiler, it's sort of the backbone of my whole blandification issue. It's the deeper root issue. If you love capitalism, that's your bag. You are optimistic about where the country and humanity and art and society is heading. Love that for you. Don't get it twisted. This is my personal issue. These are just demons I have to exercise. It's totally fine. Alarm bells have been ringing in my head for years about this whole blandification issue. It's just been recently that I've seen before and after photos that have made me realize, oh, no, this isn't all in your head. Society is grayish now. Everything's grayish. Taco Bell looks like my doctor's office. Just take away the logo. I wouldn't know what's what. It all just feels very strange. And I want to pick away at it. So this is the blandification of society, how we got here, what it's doing to our life and the way life feels, and why it's all been a bee in my bonnet. I want to start with what inspired me to bring my bitching from my personal life to the interwebs. And that is this then and now image of McDonald's. It feels like two completely different species. Like, what am I looking at? Who is this girl with the grimace and Ronald McDonald and gang painted on the wall? Who is that? What are these bright colored chairs? Even the weird, borderline creepy fixtures, statues, whatever you want to call them. All of this was clearly aimed at a more kiddo audience. And I understand that McDonald's softening the brighter neon rainbow edges makes it more appealing to those dining without kids. But McDonald's really took fun core away and left us with Shawshank Redemption core. The older buildings didn't care about subtlety. They were loud and bright. Sometimes they were weirdly shaped. And honestly, it was kind of charming in how unapologetic they were. The interiors had patterns that, yes, were very loud, but it gave McDonald's personality. Sometimes questionable personality, but still personality. Now you walk into a McDonald's and it looks like the waiting room for a mid-tier dental office. Beige walls, faux wood laminate, a few safe art prints that look like they were chosen because they won't offend anybody. The play places are gone. The colors are gone. The sense of this is a place made specifically for families is gone. It's all very polished and all very adult. Even the outside changed. Those iconic red and yellow architectural gimmicks, the things that made McDonald's look like McDonald's, gave it familiarity, have been replaced with flat gray panels and clean lines that could belong to a bank, a chain pharmacy, or an apartment complex leasing office. If you covered up the logo, half the buildings would be unidentifiable, which was just not the case back in the day. Of course, it's not just McDonald's. It's just the most obvious version of this change, especially if you're a Zillennial. It's a big, bold example of how design has been stripped down until it is impossible to recognize in a lineup. Once you know what you're looking at, the exact same design flattening shows up in almost every chain, store, and public space. A library, the mall, your doctor's office. You can feel the personality just
sucked out of there before you even sit down.
Everything is beige or gray or soft white or that like muted blue teal shade that interior designers, and I say interior designer very loosely, I think these are a very specific category of interior designers, I'll say that, but they use that exact shade of blue-ish to play some psychological color head games to convince you it's calming, but to me, it's not calming at all. It's like the design equivalent to small talk. Design-wise, you're not supposed to notice anything. You're supposed to just move through it without forming any sort of opinion. And speaking of not noticing anything, yes, I did take my nose ring out because it was very itchy. Think about malls. Malls used to be so random, like random hot air balloons on the ceiling, fake trees everywhere, colorful mosaic tiles on the floor. Even if you didn't like the layout, at least it felt alive. Compare that to the modern mall experience. Everything is sleek and open concept. Design-wise, everything is sanitized. Stores don't even fight for your attention anymore. Where are the big store signs? Where are the obnoxious displays? Being inside of a modern mall feels like being inside of an iPhone. Sidebar, I do think Apple specifically inspired a lot of the aesthetic bland changes we see, but I will get to that later. Even places that used to be inherently fun have lost their spark. Movie theaters had just as egregious of a shift as far as design as McDonald's, in my opinion. What happened to clashing geometrical patterns? What happened to the funky carpet that was so busy you could drop a pile of popcorn on it and still wouldn't be able to tell where it dropped? When I think of movie theaters from my childhood, I think of theme park energy. I know that may sound crazy if you are unfamiliar with the experience, but the design felt very abstract, very pop art, and it was exciting. It made waiting in line to buy $20 nachos a fun experience. The new theaters have the same recliners and the same dark blue LED strips, no matter where you are in the country. The lobbies are grayish at best, with maybe a pop of a muted color or two. There is nothing exciting to look at. It's an absolutely boring experience. Another example I can think of, bowling alleys, of all places. They even followed the dumb boring trend, all replaced with this generic, upscale entertainment venue vibe. And Blandification did not stop at just indoor fun. Outdoor fun, specifically public parks, are getting hit by blandness as well. Instead of those bright, colorful, slightly tacky playgrounds with wild color combinations, everything got swapped for safe, Instagram-approved, gray and muted green playgrounds that have a whisper, a shimmer of futuristic sci-fi to them. Technically, they do look nice, they are very clean looking, but how does a playground not feel like childhood? What is that? At best, they feel like an outdoor furniture catalog, and at worst, they look like an upscale prison yard. What's happening is actually very simple. Personality risks offending someone. Specificity feels dangerous. A little flavor, a little uniqueness is treated as a design flaw. So cities, developers, corporations sand everything down until there are no rough edges left. Nothing memorable, nothing weird, nothing that says, oh, someone made this on purpose. It's as I mentioned earlier, once I started seeing this, it was really weird because then it was everywhere. It was ever present. And I realized how many places I walk through every single day without feeling anything. Now I want to move on to the blandification of fashion. And I want to be clear that this is just my perspective. If you love the clean girl aesthetic or simple minimal style, I'm not saying you don't have personality. I'm not saying your style is lame. I'm looking at this on a bigger macro level. What's happening culturally, how trends are shifting, and how it all reads to me. None of this is personal, and it's definitely not an attack on anyone's style/vibe. From my perspective, the blandification hits fashion harder than almost anything else I've seen. And I don't think it's because people suddenly woke up one day and decided that they all wanted to dress like the interior of a tech company lobby. It feels more like everyone is trying not to get caught standing out. Also, it seems like the minimal style is linked to quiet luxury, or at least the illusion of quiet luxury. It's a style built on disappearing. And again, I am not trying to say minimalism is bad. I know I jest, I know I make jokes. I am certainly not the fashion police. I wear Christmas pajama pants with an oversized Godzilla t-shirt. So I'm not one to poke fun at other people's style. But when anything becomes the dominant language, it stops being a choice and turns into a default. And that's what minimalism has turned into. It's become the correct way to dress, the way you avoid judgment, and the way you stay invisible enough to pass. What I'm unsure about is if this signals the death of subcultures. I can't say for sure, but it definitely feels like they're being eroded. And I want to be fair here. There are still pockets online and offline, really, where people do build a real community, and some styles do survive longer than the algorithm gives them credit for. But compared to how things used to form, it's very different now. And to be clear, I'm not saying that in like the boomer, rah, 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 my generation was so much better back in my day, rah, rah, rah. And I think that's corny, tacky, played out, dumb. I am just saying that it is different. That's factual. Those messy, specific groups that used to define entire eras, think scene kid, grunge, skaters, emo, punk, even preppy. Each of them had a look that meant something, that signaled something. The community, the group, the trend, whatever you want to call it, it grew very slowly, which allowed each group to develop its own attitude, its own sound, its own place to belong. What immediately comes to mind for me is, I guess you could label it under preppy, like Beachy Hollister, that iconic Hollister soundtrack. Like you can just picture that exact preppy culture snapshot in time. And now everything gets churned through micro trends. And it happens so fast, no feeling and culture and community around the style has time to develop. For me personally, and I don't know if this will make sense, but I see it as almost turning identity into a rotation. Of course, this is not the case for everybody, but I feel like a lot of people don't just join a subculture. You borrow one for the weekend before the algorithm moves on. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing. This is actually positive in a lot of ways. I'm just speaking specifically on how this has contributed to the blandification of society. And yes, that is one negative aspect, but I do know there are a lot of positives that go along with this. Even when you feel like, okay, oh, something's brewing here, something's cooking here, it just gets flattened into an aesthetic, repackaged as a core, and then stripped of the weirdness or uniqueness that was starting to make it actually feel alive. And I call that specifically Pinterestification. I do love Pinterest though. Getting back to how this contributes to the blandification, like right now, what's happening, it does make sense why it's happening. Online culture, if you can believe it, has a way of punishing anything or anyone visibly different. Just a switch up of an outfit can turn into a referendum on your entire personality. So people understandably tend to opt for what's safest. The most neutral piece, the one that guarantees that they will fit in. And I don't think that this is even happening consciously for some people. From my perspective, I don't see the blandness, beigeness, whatever, as evidence of people being boring. I think it's evidence of people being scared. Scared of standing out, especially if you don't want to be perceived, if that makes you uncomfortable, and people are gross, judgmental assholes. So, that tends to happen. Scared of being memed, scared of being mislabeled, scared of being too much or not enough. Of course, there are people who actually do prefer the grays, the beige, the neutrals. That's totally fine. I'm not knocking that. I'm not saying that this is like inherently negative. I'm just speaking towards how this contributes to what's happening in society, and also acknowledging that that's just not the case for everybody. Yes, of course, there's a large population that loves minimalism, but for many people, I feel like blandness becomes a sort of shield rather than a taste preference. Let's zoom back out now and talk about the bigger landscape. Corporate culture, to be specific, because man oh man, has silence never felt quite this loud. Silence, of course, being lack of sound, but also personality, the absence of absolutely anything. Yeah, the corporate culture is the place where all the blandification becomes impossible to ignore. Most companies used to have distinct identities, some bold, some weird, some even a little chaotic, and now they're all migrating toward the same rounded typography, the same minimalist logos, the soft blues and neutrals. I swear the logos get more and more desaturated and simplified with every single iteration. The most egregious, in my opinion, to me in my heart, Dunkin' Donuts, now branded Dunkin' and made very, very boring. At least it's still orange. I am just clinging to that.
I'm like the mayor of Dunkin's. This is the face of Dunkin' Donuts right there.
Hey, you can't smoke in here, man.
I'm not, Mark. I'm not smoking in here. Grab a Corolla, have an extra large, 3 parliaments, take a big dump. That's kind of the routine. Douchebag will move when I'm ready. A little show and tell, Dunkin' Nuts. The vanilla nut test.
Oh, shit!
Cut your nails, for God's sake!
Blandification or blandness shows up in how brands speak as well. Every single PR statement hits the exact same tone. Like they're all reading from a shared script written specifically to be unmemorable. Even the god-awful fucking relatable posts feel engineered. It's just so obvious and boring and like robotic. Everything is tested, surveyed, and pre-polished into a message that could have come from any company in any industry. You simply cannot tell where one ends and the next begins. It seems that universality has become the goal. Brands want to be inoffensive, widely appealing, impossible to misinterpret. And just to be clear, when I say safe or non-offensive, I am not talking about inclusivity. That is a different thing entirely. I mean non-offensive in the corporate sense, the way brands sand down anything specific or expressive because they're terrified of being interpreted the wrong way. It's about removing personality, not about making people feel welcome. Those two things get mixed up in bad faith conversations all the time, and I just want to be crystal clear, this is not that. When billion-dollar companies strip their identities down to the safest possible version of themselves, it sets the standard for everything below them. Think Miranda Priestley talking about cerulean blue.
Sort of comical how you think that you've made a choice that exempts you from the fashion industry when in fact you're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
Stores remodel to match whatever the new aesthetic is. Products get redesigned to fit whatever looks globally safe. Ads start speaking in that same muted personality-free voice. Before long, the environments we shop in, the clothing that gets pushed to us, the content that platforms boost, all of it starts following the same rules. Be broad, be safe, and be unmemorable. Regular people absorb that without even realizing it. If the entire world is signaling that specificity is risky and neutrality is rewarded, it's no surprise that we start making smaller, safer choices in our personal lives too. The macro blandification becomes micro. It becomes personal. And what is more personal than your home? The place you lay your head. I know I'm continuing to zoom you out, then zoom you in, then zoom you out, then zoom you back in. Am I making you dizzy yet? Apologies if I am. I'm just trying to follow the structure that my brain is giving me. And to be fair, my brain isn't very structured. I know I have mentioned the McDonald's before and after picture as my inspiration to really make this video and to break this down, but there was something else that happened. Mind you, this was many years ago, and it has stayed in a corner of my brain. And unfortunately, and I really am embarrassed to admit this, I think about it a lot more than I should, probably weekly. And I am talking about that tour of Kim Kardashian's alleged house. And I say alleged because it's just rock. It's a cave. She allegedly lives in a cave. A cave might even have too much personality to compare this to. A quarry, perhaps.
In my family kitchen, and everything in my house is really minimal. I find that there's so much chaos out in the world that when I come home, I want it to be just really quiet, and I want everything to feel calming. I really like the calmness, and shockingly, 4 kids hasn't messed up my cream house. So now we're in the sitting room to my bedroom. It's really cozy. It's like a place where I love to just sit and have tea and write letters to my kids.
Bathroom. That's our patio out there. Our whole ceiling is a light box. Bathtub that fits all of our kids.
All I know is that it grinded my gaudy tacky gears. That, coupled with seeing entire neighborhoods pop up overnight and every house looking like it was copy pasted from the same design software, makes me feel like I am in a snooze fest twilight zone. There's the same gray or white siding, maybe some black accents or black trim, same fake wood vinyl floors, same open concept living room painted in the same grayish to match the outside. It feels like it's contractually required at this point. The McMansions craze is a shit stain on society, a big capitalism-colored shit stain. Developers will call this timeless, but it is not timeless. It's market safe and it's cheap. It's designed to appeal to as many buyers as possible with the least personality possible. A house with strong architectural character attracts certain people, like myself, and repels others. And as I have stated probably about 100 times so far, that is bad for business. So instead of taking creative swings like unique facades, some color, some texture, interesting lines, we get mass-produced boxes with interchangeable features. It's cheaper, it's faster, it resells predictably. That's a whole other thing that is perplexing to me. Not to go too far down a side road tangent, but people, I have noticed, when they buy a house, they still don't want to paint the walls orange or pink, even if they like that. We're saying that they like that. Obviously, if they prefer something more clean, that's a different story. I'm talking about people who like polka dot walls, right? They don't want to do anything too crazy because then how would it resell? And I'm like, girl, are you buying a home to resell it? Or are you buying a home to live in, to enjoy, to decompress, to look at the walls, to feel something, to feel like it's yourself? What are we doing here? It certainly says something bigger about society as a whole right now, at least in America, about how they view themselves and their property. Everything has to be resellable. Everything has to be likable. And that sameness spreads to the interior design as well. Everything is engineered for broad appeal. White shaker cabinets, quartz counters, stainless steel appliances. I don't know how to explain this, but I just have to say it out loud. In my mind, when I see that decor, when I see that McMansion, it feels like the visual equivalent of elevator music. Perfectly fine, nothing offensive to anyone, and impossible to remember. Now, if it was my elevator made in my design, dragging these poor people up and down the levels, it would be probably 100 gecs playing. That is the musical equivalent to my design taste. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm wild. I just, appreciate homes that carry the fingerprints of the people who built them. quirks, odd choices, again, personality, and again, trickle-down effect happens. Most of us don't build our homes from scratch or even own homes. We move into whatever already exists. So if the only thing being built is a neutral template-style housing, that becomes the environment you inherit. When you go to decorate, you probably turn to places everyone turns to. Pinterest, TikTok, IKEA, Target, Amazon. And all of those platforms are feeding off the same imagery developers created. High income or low income, it does not matter. The affordable options and the aspirational ones are all designed to fit the same white-walled, open-concept backdrop. So you, no matter what your financial or home situation looks like, end up decorating within the limits of a style you never chose. Not because you prefer blandness, but because it's the only thing available, the only thing shown to you, and the only thing that matches the space you were given. The bland foundation shapes the bland options, and the bland options shape how we live. If you weren't dizzy yet, here you go, another zoom out, because a shift this big does not happen out of nowhere. There were clear leaders who set the tone for the new minimalist, boring-ass landscape, and the rest of the world followed. As I declared at the very beginning, Apple is, in my opinion, the biggest one. When the iPhone and MacBook became cultural touchstones, their design language, clean lines, soft gradients, white space, rounded edges, turned into a template for what modern was supposed to look like. The simplicity worked for Apple because it was part of a larger philosophy. Remove friction, remove clutter, make the tech feel invisible. But the success was so massive that everyone else copied the aesthetic without understanding the philosophy behind it, or maybe understanding the philosophy perfectly fine and just not giving a shit. They just wanted the same success. Then tech companies as a whole adopted the same look. Google, Meta, Airbnb, everyone shifted toward flat icons, desaturated or pastel palettes, and friendly geometric shapes. Startups wanted to look innovative, so they just mimicked whatever Apple and Google were doing. Corporate branding agencies saw the trend performing very well and started recommending it to clients across every industry. It spread from tech to banks, restaurants, clothing brands, hospitals, universities, until every sector was speaking the same visual language. And the thing is, minimalism was not the problem. The problem was, it became a one-size-fits-all solution. Companies were not choosing it because it fit their identity. They were choosing it because it made them look current, profitable, and algorithm-friendly. What started as a clear, intentional design philosophy turned into a default setting. Apple simplified to make life easier because that's what their brand, their product was all about. Everyone else simplified because it was safer. And everything slowly reshaped itself around that decision. Until minimalism stopped being a style and became the baseline. Instagram completely accelerated the shift faster than anything else, though. The algorithm rewarded whatever photographed well. Clean spaces, neutral palettes, minimal backgrounds, perfectly lit rooms with no visual noise. Bright, weird interiors did not look cohesive on a grid, but beige walls and simple furniture always did. So inevitably, that's what rose to the top. And once Instagram became the main place where brands advertised themselves, it was game over. There was absolutely no going back from the digital aesthetic at that point. Cafes remodeled to be Instagrammable. Hotels redesigned their lobbies around photo ops. Going back to the personal home design choices, even those got influenced. People decorated and decorate not for how a room feels to live in, but for how it looks in a square, how it looks in the background of your selfie. The digital preference for blandness leaked into the real world one post at a time. At a certain point, this stops being about malls and logos and wallpaper choices and starts being about how people experience the world. When every restaurant, store, apartment, and office shifts towards the same neutral palette, it changes the way we remember things and move through our lives. Environments shape memory. There's nothing poetic about that. That's just how the brain works. Color, texture, odd layouts, small quirks. Those details anchor experiences. They give a place a sense of identity. You remember where something happened because the environment had presence. I think that is why there is such heavy, overwhelming nostalgia right now. Even for kids who never experienced the 80s, 90s, 2000s quirkiness. I can't go too far down that road because it could be a whole YouTube video on its own, especially nostalgia marketing. And if that is what rips up this grayish baseline we're at, please keep the Pokemon cards coming. When everything adopts the same neutral tone, the world starts to blur. A fast food place in Ohio feels like your dentist office in Alaska. A coffee shop looks like a co-working space that also looks like an airport lounge. You lose the geographic anchor that makes places feel distinct. It's not that bland spaces are inherently bad. It's that when every space is bland, nothing stands out. A lot of people forget how much personality older environments had. It blows my mind to say this, but there are adults who've never even seen a play place. And I'm not saying that older environments were better. I mean, I'm personally saying that. I believe that. But that's just subjective. That's just not the truth for some people. But because they weren't designed with a universal appeal in mind, a diner looked like a diner. A toy store felt like a sensory overload in the best way. A mall had its own little ecosystem of chaos. Now everything feels like a placeholder, as if it's just waiting for something to happen, instead of hosting the thing that's actually happening. And then there is the erosion of third spaces. If you don't already know what those are, I'll break it down in a very simple way. It's the places that sit between home and work. Arcades, diners, mall food courts, even quirky little coffee shops. They are spaces that encourage lingering, wasting time, bumping into people by accident. Most modern spaces are built for efficiency, quick movement, quiet productivity. They are meant to be passed through, not occupied. And to state the most obvious of obvious things, when environments stop inviting people to linger, then people stop lingering. I am now going to zoom you out to the absolute max, and I am going to dabble in a little tinfoil hattery. The erosion of third spaces starts to look less like an accident and more like a convenient side effect for the people at the top. Capitalism. When public life loses the places where people can hang out without spending any money, you end up with a culture that only has two modes, and that is home and, most importantly, consumption. Major correction here. You have three modes. The third and the actual most important one in society is work mode. More specifically, a grayish home, a quarry, a cave, or consumption in a grayish square box. Third spaces used to create community, connection, and unpredictability. Things that can't be measured, monetized, or controlled. But a society built on efficiency benefits from environments where people move quickly, don't gather in groups, don't form grassroots culture, and don't sit around long enough to talk, plan, or question anything. Bland, efficient spaces keep everyone in motion, cycling between home, work, and sanitized commercial zones where every minute has purpose and every distraction leads back to spending. Henry Ford is collapsing in his grave. The less personality a place has, the less you attach to it. The less you attach, the easier it is to replace, redevelop, repurpose, and push people through it like a system. Blandification is not just an aesthetic I am bitching about here. It's a structure that keeps society predictable, profitable, and very quietly disconnected. The emotional impact can seem subtle, sure, but it's real. Distinct design can make you feel something, even if the feeling is just, wow, this carpet is insane. Blandness doesn't do that. It smooths everything out. The emotional peaks and valleys flatten. Life becomes a sequence of interchangeable rooms, and you are left with dullness. It's not sadness or anything, it's the absence of stimulation, which reads as calm at first, but settles into something closer to emptiness over time. And eventually, the consumer becomes passive. When everything looks the same, you stop paying attention. That is very convenient for corporations. Predictable customers spend in predictable ways. Blandness turns buying into a reflex instead of an experience. You don't feel invested, you just participate. And that is the quiet consequence of blandification. A culture that still functions, it still moves, but doesn't really feel much along the way. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say on the blandification of society. A slow slide into sameness driven by algorithms, billion-dollar companies, and, at least in my opinion, capitalism, doing what, capitalism inevitably does, which is squeezing out anything unpredictable in favor of what sells the smoothest, whatever's gonna make them the most money. And none of this means we have to panic, okay? This is not me fear-mongering. Babe, there's plenty to be afraid of, plenty to panic over in the world right now. You pick which one you want to be panicked about, okay? This is just not one of those things. I am not saying that you gotta take a neon spray paint to every beige wall you see, although that does sound like a start to me. I think it's worth paying attention to the stuff around us. And maybe now is a good time to start bringing a little weirdness back into our own corners of the world. So don't panic about this specifically, but while you're panicking, buy the loud rug, paint the wall a ridiculous color, wear something that doesn't fit the vibe, wear the iguanas staring at the moon shirt that you can get from Five Below, by the way. Great selection. The world is already just blending us all together into this shitty shade, not even shitty shade of brown. That would at least have some life and be exciting. We're being blended into a grayish, boring, predictable consumer, okay? That's easy to sell shit to on TikTok. All I'm saying is we certainly don't have to make it any easier for them.